When it comes to high fashion, Versace is one of the best-known names in the business. Their clothes, accessories, fragrances, and even home decor decorate some of the wealthiest and most elite clientele on the planet. But who created this incredible luxury brand? His story is certainly not to be missed. Born on December 2nd, 1946, in Reggio Calabria, Italy, Gianni Versace was just a normal Italian boy from the countryside. His family did well for themselves. Antonio Versace, Gianni's father, was an appliance salesman, and his mother was a successful dressmaker. Although their life was simple, the Versaces certainly knew tragedy as, sadly, Gianni's sister Tina passed away when she was only 12 years old from a tetanus infection. Gianni is said to have never truly gotten over the loss of his sister at such a young age. However, it did make his family that much closer. He and his other siblings, Santo and Donatella, were thick as thieves. But young Gianni spent most of his early years at his mother's side, in the dressmaking shop and clothing store. He had an immense love for fashion and dressmaking from only 6 years old, which would stay with him for a lifetime. He made his very first dress at 9 years old, and it was said to be a beautiful blue one-shouldered evening gown. From that time until he was 26, he worked as his mother's apprentice and learned everything he could before finally leaving home and heading to Milan to start his career. When Gianni arrived in Milan in 1972, the city was the new epicenter for fashion, and both experienced and aspiring designers were here creating some of the world's most impressive clothing. He quickly made his way into the world of fashion in Milan by working for some of the leading designers in the country, such as Gianni, Complice, Mario Valentino, and Callahan. He worked on their design teams and showed his skills to the community with several personally designed lines for both Gianni and Complice. But it wasn't long before Versace wanted to strike out on his own. In 1978, only 6 years after moving to Milan, Versace opened his very own boutique in the heart of Milan. The company of Versace was born. And although Gianni was said to be the creator, it really was a family business. His brother Santo worked as CEO, and his sister Donatella was a designer and vice president. That same year, he presented his first complete collection at the Palazzo della Permanente Art Museum of Milan, with immediate and wild success. The public couldn't get enough of Versace. His clothes were different from the others being designed in Milan during the 70s, and he was known for being provocative, innovative, and refreshing. Of course, with great success always comes great rivalry, and none other than Giorgio Armani became his #1 competitor, although their styles couldn't have been more different. The saying goes that Armani dresses the wife, Versace dresses the mistress. Versace's early designs were bold, colorful, and sexy. With unique prints and distinctive cuts and materials, you could always tell what was a Versace and what wasn't. He got inspiration from his southern Italian roots, as well as his love for ancient Greek and Roman art and architecture. You can see the Greco influence in the symbol for the brand as well, the head of Medusa. In addition to ancient art, modern art, such as pieces from Andy Warhol and Roy Lichtenstein, also inspired many of his designs. He loved to mix materials, which at the time was incredibly rare. He used lace, metal, crystals, and leather in various combinations. Gianni was quoted as saying, "I don't believe in good taste," and his clothes proved that he was willing to explore the boundaries of what was considered fashionable to completely new levels. Over the next 2 decades, Versace continued to push the envelope with his designs, and even his fashion shows. The models were often dressed in bondage, silver chainmail, and other extremely sexualized outfits, while the show itself felt more like a rock concert than a fashion show. Although his clothes and style certainly spoke for themselves, one of the most defining characteristics of the Versace brand was the people who wore it. Today, celebrity endorsements are one of the most necessary aspects of success in the fashion industry. But did you know that this idea really started with Versace? In the early 1980s, celebrities such as Elton John, Michael Jackson, Cher, and Madonna were wearing and supporting the Versace brand. And Princess Diana even wore a version of Versace's very first one-shouldered blue evening gown, 40 years after its original conception. Many people simply wanted to wear the same shirt or dress that their favorite celebrity had worn, and the desire for a Versace look in everyone's closet increased exponentially. By the 1990s, the obsession with Versace and the incredible shows that they produced created an entirely new profession, the supermodel. Women such as Lena Evangelista, Christy Turlington, Cindy Crawford, and Naomi Campbell were paid such high salaries for consistently walking in Versace shows that the new label of supermodel was dubbed, and they became the first of many to come. Versace has since been credited with essentially creating the infatuation, and now the extremely important relationship between celebrities and the fashion industry. It's important to note that this was not an accident. Although Gianni was an impeccable designer, he was also considered quite a genius at marketing. He purposefully only used supermodels, celebrities, and high-quality photographers to show off his clothes. And of course, by making every fashion show an electric and entertaining event, the world was always watching Versace. This tactic proved wildly successful as the entire world wanted to look like the men and women they saw wearing Versace's clothes. Throughout the decade, the brand was not only clothing the hottest celebrities, but was also becoming more available to the masses. In 1991, the first store outside of Italy opened in Glasgow, Scotland, and they continued to open boutiques all around the world. Although the clothes were quite expensive, people were willing to spend in order to own something designed and created by the one and only Versace. With his immense wealth, Gianni spent $30 million renovating a home in Miami where he would live. The Versace mansion was known for its elegance, luxury, and celebrity-filled parties. But while life in Miami was glorious, it only lasted a few years. Sadly, on July 15, 1997, Gianni was only 50 years old when he was shot twice on the steps of his home. The killer, Andrew Cunanan, was 27 years old and was later found to be a spree killer who died 8 days later. As the FBI investigated Gianni's murder, they found that the young Cunanan was obsessed with the designer and had claimed to acquaintances that they were best friends. However, as far as the investigators could tell, the two had only met once. There was some controversy as to whether or not the two men's lives had intertwined, but the Versace family has always claimed that they did not have any relationship, and the murder remains a mystery to both the police and the public. Gianni's death was a great shock and loss to not only the fashion community, but also to the world at large. The steps of his home became a memorial to his immense popularity and were covered with photos, flowers, and homage to the genius he was. Donatella and Santo flew quickly from Milan to Miami, and his lavish funeral was planned for only a few days later. More than 2,000 people arrived to pay their respects, including Princess Diana, Elton John, and many of the other biggest names on the planet at the time. Gianni was remembered that day and always as a man who changed fashion forever. His artistry and love for innovation led to designs that were absolutely one of a kind. And although Gianni was certainly the mastermind behind this incredible brand, luckily for everyone, his death was not the end of Versace. By the 1990s, the Versace brand was not only creating beautiful fashion, but also homeware, accessories, costumes, and much more. In fact, before Gianni was murdered, the brand was already worth an unbelievable $807 million. Unfortunately, things took a dangerous turn for the company in 1998 when Gianni's siblings, Donatella and Santo, took over the company together. At the time, Donatella was struggling with drug addiction, and she and Santo were fighting constantly. The two simply could not see eye to eye as to how to proceed with the business. Although technically, Donatella had been named the new creative director, her substance abuse made it impossible for her to work, and in 2004, she checked herself into rehab. When she left rehab, she was finally ready to run Versace, as Gianni had hoped she would. Santo was CEO, and Donatella was in charge of art and design. The company continued to flourish, and was still considered one of the most popular and beloved clothing brands on the planet. Donatella already had all the celebrity connections that her brother Gianni had established decades before. But she made a new name for herself when J.Lo wore her jungle dress in the year 2000. After she wore Donatella's dress, J-Lo in the jungle dress was the most searched image on Google of all time. In fact, it was the catalyst for Google's image search engine page. The company realized that people wanted pictures just as much as they wanted text. And this new technology maybe wouldn't have happened so soon if it wasn't for the people's desire to see Versace. Gianni always wanted Versace to be a completely independent brand, and although Donatella is still the creative director, Versace is technically owned by the parent company, Capri Limited. Capri spent $2.2 billion in 2019 to purchase the company, but Donatella is still worth an amazing $400 million. Donatella remains the face of Versace today, and her flawless fashion sense has led to several collections that have continued to wow the fashion industry. Luckily for Versace and all those who love the brand, it's said that even though it was purchased by Capri, the clothing, accessories, and everything else they make are still of the highest quality. There are now more than 1,500 Versace distributors throughout every corner of the world, and Versace is still beloved and known as it was 40 years ago as the height of Italian luxury, exotic prints and colors, and sensual design. Hungry for another fascinating business story? Click on the following video to hear the crazy story about the homeless who created dominoes with his last few coins.